November 6th, 2015, exactly a month from now, is going to be 2 years from the release of Black Ops 3, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I wanted to talk about the differences from the release of the game to the way we know it today. There are many things that are different in Black Ops 3, and some of which changed the game for the better, and others that made the game maybe a little bit worse. Now, as far as Black Ops 3, it's kind of an anomaly as Call of Duty goes, and the reason why I say that is most Call of Duty games basically have a year lifespan, and after that year, they're just kind of dead to the community. There's been a few games that have been an exception to that, some of which have been Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 2, and now Black Ops 3. Now, there may be many reasons for this, like the following game flopping. For example, if we look at the game after Black Ops 3 being Infinite Warfare, it didn't sell nearly as well as Black Ops 3, meaning that Black Ops 3, instead of having the normal Call of Duty 1-year lifespan, is now going to have a 2-year lifespan. That's why I think looking at Black Ops 3 over these 2 years is such an interesting thing to look at. I think another thing that's important to look at as far as Black Ops 3 goes is that it excelled as Call of Duty as a series was decelerating. And what I mean by that is if you look at the past Call of Duty games, if you look at Call of Duty Ghosts and Advanced Warfare, the sales of Call of Duty were decreasing, and they were decreasing very quickly. And then all of a sudden Black Ops 3 came along and is all of a sudden the second top selling Call of Duty game of all time, right behind Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which is absolutely a massive accomplishment for Treyarch, especially the way the Call of Duty series was trending. Now, at this exact moment 2 years ago, Black Ops 3 was not yet released. However, everyone at this point had played the beta for Black Ops 3. And after the beta, hopes were high. People were really excited for the game. But there were a few things that are interesting to look back on that are completely different now. One of which is the weapons that were really good. First of all, back in the beta, the God Gun was the Razorback. I don't know if many of you remember this, but if you played the beta, almost every single person in the game was using the Razorback. And then after the beta, the Razorback got a massive nerf and never really recovered from that. It was never really the power weapon that it was in the beta of Black Ops 3. So then when Black Ops 3 was fully released, we were then introduced to a lot of brand new features to the Call of Duty franchise. One of which that we featured thoroughly on this channel was paint jobs. And paint jobs were basically a way to customize your weapon and make them look the exact way you wanted to. We saw things like this where they changed the marshals into Twix bars, or we've seen even more extensive things where they turned boxing gloves into full-on x-rays where you could see the outline of a hand. This new feature, coupled with the extensive emblem editor, made for a really cool sub-community. All of these artistic people got together and made a ton of awesome paint jobs and emblems, in which I featured a ton of on this channel. Even to this date, Black Ops 3 is the only Call of Duty game to have a paint job feature in the game thus far, and as of right now, we don't know whether this feature is going to be in Call of Duty World War II or not. Aside from that, a couple of new gameplay features that were in Black Ops 3 was, first of all, 3D movement. This was the first Call of Duty game that Treyarch made where there was things like boost jumps and wall running. And as far as I think most people thought playing this game, they did it in a much more balanced and kind of sensical way than the pogo stick movement of Advanced Warfare. Now, even though this was a new change for a Treyarch Call of Duty game, I don't think it was the biggest change to the gameplay. What I think the biggest change was in Black Ops 3 was the specialist characters, for two reasons. First of all, it added a storyline to the multiplayer of a Call of Duty game. Each character had their own backstory, and each character had lore that you could find out about their individuality. On top of that, it changed the way that the game was played. All of a sudden, every once in a while in a game, you would have basically this superpower that you could call upon and destroy your enemies with. Whether you absolutely loved specialist abilities or absolutely hated them, you have to admit it did change the multiplayer of what Call of Duty is. Since then, Infinite Warfare uses this specialist ability, whereas, as we know, World War II does not have these, at least that we know of yet. As far as what weapons were godly at the release of Black Ops 3, there was really two that were really good, one of which that you probably remember, and one of which you probably don't. The first one was the Vesper. The Vesper was absolute godly. This weapon had the fastest fire rate in the game with very, very low recoil. This was pretty quickly nerfed, and the way they did so was by adding a whole bunch of recoil to the weapon. Throughout the life cycle of Black Ops 3, the Vesper was kind of buffed and nerfed and buffed and nerfed to the form that we see today, which has just a little bit too much recoil for it to be viable as the best weapon in the game. This was later replaced by the VMP, which kind of has like the second fastest fire rate for an SMG and is a great substitute and by many considered to be the best weapon to date in Black Ops 3. Also, another weapon that a lot of people use was the M8A7, a burst action weapon that still to this day is very, very good. And throughout the life cycle of Black Ops 3, they really didn't make many changes at all to the M8A7. That being said, another weapon that was absolute godly at the release of Black Ops 3 that a lot of you may have forgot about was actually a weapon that a lot of people hate to use right now in the game. And that weapon would be the Gorgon. Now, the interesting thing about this weapon is even to this date, it's still a 2-bullet kill at any range. The problem with the Gorgon is it has an absolute garbage fire rate of 327 RPM. The difference between the beginning of Black Ops 3 and what it is now is that at the beginning of Black Ops 3, the Gorgon had a sprint out and aim down sights time the same of assault rifle. So all of a sudden you had a weapon that had a little bit slower of a fire rate than assault rifle, always killed in 2 bullets, and had the same aim down sights time and sprint out time. It was an absolute force to be reckoned with, and they needed to nerf it. On top of that, they also nerfed it and made it so it had a longer reload time than it did at the beginning of the game as well. This weapon has actually had several nerfs, and if you didn't use this game right at the beginning of Black Ops 3, you may not know that the weapon was pretty good at the release of the game. And I think the biggest change of all to come at the release of Black Ops 3 would be crypto keys. All of a sudden, there was a new currency in Call of Duty. It was no longer just about your XP level and your prestige. All of a sudden, crypto keys kind of took over, and everyone was worried about gaining those instead of gaining levels. Also, supply drops were reinvented in Black Ops 3, something that was actually added in Advanced Warfare. Now, it wasn't until later that they added different weapons in supply drops. At the beginning of Call of Duty Black Ops 3, it was cosmetic items only. Now, as we now know in Black Ops 3, there are plenty of weapons that you can only get through supply drops. And when this was first added in, it made a lot of people mad. In fact, there was a movement that went on around the end of March that was called Black Market Blackout, in which the community was supposed to band together and not buy supply drops. Now, of course, this didn't really work, and as we know, since then, they've added more and more and more supply drop content. And a lot of people would think that that was a big failure upon the Call of Duty community, but I actually don't believe so, because after this big movement, they introduced a ton of new ways to gain crypto keys, including daily and weekly challenges. Since then, we've had new things like triple plays and grand slams and these new types of challenges and supply drops that make it a little bit easier for us to get this DLC content. By no means am I saying the way you get supply drop weapons is perfect in Black Ops 3. In fact, it's far from that, but they did make the system a lot better than it originally was when they first started introducing content that actually changed the way the multiplayer was played. So by no means did they change the way supply drop content worked or anything like that. However, I do believe the movement of Black Market Blackout did make a small difference in the way they do supply drops. As we know now in Infinite Warfare, they changed it up. In Modern Warfare Remastered, they changed it up, and we are still yet to find out the way that they're going to be approaching supply drops come Call of Duty World War II. And I would say, even though they added a ton of different weapons and supply drop content and cosmetic items, the biggest change that we can see between the beginning and the current state of Black Ops 3 has to be with the challenges, and specifically the 10th specialist character, Blackjack. About 7, maybe 8 months into the release of Black Ops 3, they released a 10th specialist character, something new to add to the game to switch it up a little bit. On top of that, they added challenges and weekly ways of obtaining this 10th specialist character. Now, this is a massive success. This amount of change in a video game, specifically a Call of Duty game, is the reason why I believe Black Ops 3 was as successful as it actually was. And what I mean by that is, numbers-wise, Black Ops 3 was a phenomenon. It was the second top-selling Call of Duty game of all time, which puts it as one of the just top-selling video games of all time as well. The interesting thing about this is that this was not the case at the beginning of Black Ops 3. When Black Ops 3 was first released, by no means was it a top-selling Call of Duty game. However, throughout the year life cycle that a Call of Duty game would normally be fulfilled, it slowly sold more and more and more copies, to where all of a sudden, about a year and a half after the release of the game, it was close to the top-selling Call of Duty game of all time. It was a slow burn, something that Call of Duty doesn't normally do. Normally, in a Call of Duty game release, it sells all of its copies at 2 times, at the release of the game and at Christmas. Not so much in Black Ops 3, to the point, even after Infinite Warfare was out, some people were buying just Black Ops 3 for the first time instead of getting Infinite Warfare, something I've never seen before in the Call of Duty community. So it made for a really interesting time in the Call of Duty community. A time where people simply weren't playing the present Call of Duty game. They weren't playing Infinite Warfare. People were still playing Black Ops 3. Could it be because of all of the updates and new content they added to the game? Or could it be that Black Ops 3 is just a really good Call of Duty game? Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I know a lot of people really love Black Ops 3, and a lot of people at the same time really dislike Black Ops 3. So like I said, let me know what you think down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, found it informative, and like what you saw, you can always hit that like button. It's always greatly appreciated. And if you like what you saw, you can always check out the rest of the content on my channel, and maybe you want to subscribe if you enjoy it. But guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, peace out.
Maybe you should take it slow.